basically lead us to where we are and lead us to where we're happiest. So we're going to hear from 3 women. We have Nyla, we have Naomi, and we have Joanna, who's kind of going to facilitate this conversation, who are remarkably accomplished. And today they're going to reflect on the choices that they've made to arrive to where they are in their careers. Each of these women has challenged the status quo. In the course of this conversation, you'll see how each of them had to utilize their strengths and their differences to affect change. So with that in mind, I'll let Joanna take the lead here and enjoy.
Thank you. Well, thank you all for coming. Like Mika said, I think it's amazing when a group of people are interested in expanding their minds and meeting other people. So I appreciate you all coming out, and we're all very excited to be here and share our experiences. So I thought what I would do to start is just take 2 minutes for each of us to give you our life story in 2 minutes. I'll go last. I'll start with Nyla.
Okay. Professional or personal?
Well,
or?
whatever you want, but mainly professional.
Mainly professional. Okay, so I'm currently working at Rogers. I've been at Rogers for about 15 years, and I am probably the biggest accident that's ever happened to Rogers. My whole career there has been unanticipated. I started off on a 6-month contract, and when I took the contract, I said to my husband, you know what, I'm just going to do this while I find a real job. And that has really pretty much been my attitude for the past 15 years. You know, I'm not a very unlikely person to find within a big corporation like Rogers. And I think that has been my biggest success in working in a company like Rogers, because I've just always looked to learn in my role. It was never, for me, it has never really been about the job or the career. And I've had an opportunity in a company like that, and the time that I arrived, I mean, keep in mind, I grew up without the internet. I remember when the World Wide Web was created, and the transformation that that created across all of our lives, but particularly in telecom space, offered a lot of opportunities for me. And I just kind of went from one to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. And I would say that, you know, people always come to me for career advice. How did you plan what you did? I mean, the truth of the matter is I didn't plan any of it. I couldn't anticipate what was happening next. And at any given time, I always had one foot out the door. And so in that environment, in terms of finding the choices you make and being happy, I was really fortunate, because that attitude was exactly the right attitude to have when you were living in a period of such technological change. I think we're going to get to this, but the other kind of big defining thing about me being at Rogers is a woman at Rogers. And I think we've all talked about, you know, always being the only woman in the room and what that means. But that is for sure, I mean, we will get to it, but that is a big part of my experience in my career, particularly being in tech, particularly trying to be kind of trailblazer sorts of roles, which I hope will change for all of you as you head in your careers, but probably not. So I think we're going to share a lot of learnings here.
So just so everyone knows, what is your role today?
Oh, for sure.
Yes.
So currently I am the Senior Vice President of Marketing for the Enterprise Division of Rogers, which is a very high growth division. It's about a $2 billion business, and it is growing and growing and growing. And I oversee a marketing department, and I am not a marketer. I have no marketing in my background, but marketing in the B2B space is very much driven by technology. And so a lot of my tech experience and my startup experience is really the biggest asset in this particular role. And again, accident, not expected. You would have never thought I would be a candidate for this, but sometimes that's how life works.
All right, thank you. Naomi.
So I'm Naomi Titleman, and I most recently was the head of HR for American Express Canada. I say most recently, I actually left that job a couple of weeks ago, and I could probably look to many of you because I'm about to embark on a whole new journey, starting my own consulting business. I started out in kind of tech operations consulting. How does that bring you to HR, you ask? While I was doing kind of this tech internal controls consulting, I actually started out in undergrad, I took coding. So I actually grew up kind of doing STEM and really enjoying it, and ended up in kind of tech consulting when it was brand new, focused on operations, controls consulting, and then realized that my larger clients were acquiring my smaller clients and doing nothing about the people. And I said, there's got to be something here in terms of what you can do to make people feel better about being acquired by a huge company where now they have to have all these processes and sign-offs and all these different things that they never had to do before, and that must make them pretty miserable. So there's got to be something there. So I went and did my MBA at Columbia. I was in New York at the time, and while I was there, I kind of said, I want to do something in change management. I'm not sure what it is, but I want to do something in change management. So I returned to consulting, but this time in human capital consulting, and started out in change management, kind of ran the gamut of talent strategy, communications, org design, kind of everything to do with kind of the HR or the people side of the business in consulting. And then after my first child, I realized I can't do consulting, I can't be a road warrior, and I decided to go internal to American Express, actually in a global HR business partner role, which those of you who are not in HR probably have no idea what that means, but it basically means partnering with the business and solving kind of any people problems that they have. So whether it be an org design problem, how to better structure teams to get work done better, communications issues, compensation issues, so kind of run the gamut of working directly with executives on how to solve people-related problems. I moved to Canada 2 months into my brand new career in HR because my husband got a job here, and that was our choice as a family. One of the themes that we're going to talk about today is deliberate choices. So one of our deliberate choices was it was time to move here for family reasons and for my husband's career, and I ended up taking my job with me. After child 2, I ended up getting kind of the role as head of HR for Canada, and did that for a couple of years. Great stint, great run, and now I'm kind of ready to get back to my consulting roots in a little bit of a more kind of personally meaningful, impactful, smaller way, if that makes sense. So that's me.
All right, and me, well, I'm a serial entrepreneur. Just quickly, before I became a serial entrepreneur junkie, we'll talk a bit about it soon, but I started my career and my education in math and finance, and decided that, well, that came naturally to me. It didn't fulfill me at all. I wasn't passionate about it, and that's kind of come up in our next chapter, but needless to say, I made a switch early on into marketing, and I worked at a number of marketing roles, worked in an ad agency for a number of years, and then in 2004 I had an idea for a business. I was inspired by something I'd seen in the US, and I started a business called sweetspot.ca, which some of you may be familiar with, and it was an online, it was a daily email and online magazine for women, lifestyle information. It was 2004, and at the time in 2004, getting daily consumer-based emails was not common. It was really the days of B2B marketing was what email was used for. People weren't consuming this type of information typically, so it was very new, ahead of its time. And I grew the business and ultimately sold it to Rogers. And since Nyla's here, I'll be really nice about it. Rogers ultimately shut the business down, but that was another, she had nothing to do with it. She's lovely.
I was advocating for it.
Yeah, she was. So another life lesson, but it was an incredible experience, the whole thing. I learned so much. Then in 2011, I saw another opportunity in this market, which was there was not a lot of e-commerce at all, but especially for women and fashion, and I started a business called eLux. But it was really based on what I love and am passionate about and believe as far as engaging consumers, which was content. So we had a weekly digital magazine, so bringing sort of my sweet spot experience in, and this magazine would inspire and entertain and give women fashion and style ideas with the end goal of purchasing the goods. I headed that up for about 3 years, and then for me, I hit a real sort of personal wall. The business had grown. It was very capital intensive. I was spending most of my time raising money, and I got so far away from doing what I love, which is marketing, branding, strategy, and it was a very challenging business to run because Canada was still not really set for e-commerce. I made a big decision to step down as CEO and take some time off, and about 3 years ago I started a consulting firm called Good Eggs & Co., where I've basically taken all that experience and helped other brands grow their businesses mainly in lifestyle, so fashion and beauty and wellness, but actually really more just in women-targeted businesses, and with a focus on digital strategies. And it was really rewarding to take all my experience and pass it on, but after 3 years, I was really feeling, like I always say, I kind of felt like I was an overqualified water girl because I was helping everybody, but I wasn't in the game myself, and I was really missing it. So I've been working on it all year, but 6 weeks ago I launched a new business. So you see when I say I'm a junkie, not kidding, which is my plug of the night. I hope you'll all sign up. It's called thebullet.ca, and it's a daily newsletter that dishes out the world and national news in a lighthearted, entertaining manner. So it gives you the news, but it's simplified, and when appropriate, we have some humor attached. And it's been a lot of fun, and so right now I'm doing both and things like this, and it's a pleasure to be here. So, with all that said, I know that when Mika first rounded us up all together, there was a real interest in not focusing on STEM, but addressing the fact that women in STEM-related careers, and I think everyone knows what that means, but just for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, right? And ironically, and you know, the fact that even today it's a lot better than it was, but there's not a lot of women in those careers. Why is that? What should we be doing about it? And I don't even think it was really planned, but ironically, the three of us come from very STEM-related backgrounds. Like I mentioned, I majored in math. Nyla
Science,
and Naomi said she was in coding.
I learned Pascal. Most of you probably don't even know what that means.
Yeah. So it's interesting though, because none of us actually, like on the surface, works in a STEM-related career now. And so what I wanted to talk about for a few minutes is what happened, how did you start there and not in there, and knowing what you know about the world today, would you have done it differently? Mm-hmm. So.
I can take it first because you got first last time. So in undergrad, I was in a Bachelor's of Commerce program, and I decided to specialize in information systems, and essentially had to choose between kind of the database stuff and the coding stuff. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this coding stuff. It seems like fun. It's kind of a challenge that you know what the right answer is at the end. It's very logical, it's very structured, it's very rational, and I really, really enjoyed it. I found it almost like playing a game every day. And then I went on to be a teacher's assistant in coding, and it was really a lot of fun. And then when I was making my decision where to go in terms of my first step in my career, I wanted it to be technology related, and again, it was kind of the very first kind of where technology consulting was becoming kind of the thing. I wanted it to be technology related, but I didn't want it to be coding, because I assumed that coding would mean kind of sitting in your own cube and really just focusing and writing code. And what I really wanted to do was partner with other people and really kind of bring in the people and more business oriented side of it. So happenstance that I ended up being recruited to a consulting company in New York that needed someone kind of with a technology background, but really to focus on kind of the business controls, operational risk associated with technology, and kind of that's the way I went. But I will say that starting out in coding and tech lay the foundation for a very logical, rational way of thinking that I really think I've brought with me even through HR. So if you think about the connection between coding and HR, it's like it's very difficult to make that connection. But if you practice HR, you know that you actually have to be pretty emotionally detached from some of the decisions that you make, and it's very structured and process and logic-oriented decisions that you have to make. And I really feel that having that background and that structure and that discipline really has helped me in my career. So that's kind of.
I say that all the time to people. Like, I mean, I spend my life in marketing, branding, strategy, fashion, all these things, and I majored in mathematics with a specialty in calculus. And the reason I did it, which also always sounds funny, is because it just came to me so naturally and I aced it. I didn't try hard, it just was an aptitude I had. And I went to Western and I literally took math so that I didn't have to study, which sounds so odd, but that was the reason. It wasn't because I was passionate about it, I didn't care about it. But what I say today is no, I don't use calculus equations in my daily decision making, but it's the way of thinking and the way I process information and organize that information, even if it's a presentation, anything I do, I know that training of how my mind works has become very valuable and helped me through my career.
Yeah.
Nyla, what about your experience?
Yeah, I mean, sort of similar. I would say that, there is some kind of literature in child development that says, that you're fully formed by the time you're 10. And that for the rest of your life, you're just actually honing all the stuff that happened between 0 to 10. And I actually do believe that there's a lot of truth to that. And when I first heard about that, I thought back to what was I like before I was 10. And there are two things that really stood out to me that I could remember. The one was, I was a very creative kid, so I loved arts and crafts. I loved, and my parents still have, every time there was anyone's birthday or anniversary, I would do these like crazy cards and all these arts and crafts. Clearly, I loved it. So there was a creative side. And I do remember when I started school, when I went into school, I had a younger brother, and I would come home from school. I loved learning. I loved being in school. And I would sit my brother down and all my dolls and stuff, and I would replay everything that I had learned in school. And it was such a vivid memory to me, and just being very organized and playing the role of the teacher. Also, my parents both worked, and on the weekends, it was the time for them to deal with kind of all the stuff around the house and around the family. And I remember there was always a decision that was offered to my brothers and I. Mom's going grocery shopping, Dad's going to Canadian Tire. You decide who you want to go with. And I always went to Canadian Tire because I was so fascinated with that. I had no interest in going to the grocery store. I loved going to Canadian Tire. And till this day, one of my favorite things to do is if I go to a travel and I go to an old town and I find an old hardware store, like you can see me in there for hours because I love that. And it wasn't until much later in life that I realized that what I ended up gravitating towards, my parents are both from science backgrounds, and they hoped that, all the kids would go into science, and unfortunately for them, the only one that made it in was me, and I went into science. But just the age that I am and what was happening in the world is that right around the time that I was in university and we were all in science, there wasn't such thing as technology careers. I mean, there were no desks, there were no computers, there was no internet, there was no cell phones. It all happened during the time that I was starting to figure things out. The world was starting to figure things out around technology, and so I gravitated there. And when I think back now, prior to Rogers, I was the editor-in-chief of Owl magazine, Owl, Chickadee, Chirp. They're science magazines for kids. I created Chirp. All these things are, to me, it's really a combination of the two things I loved when I was 10 years old. It's teaching people about the importance of science and technology in a way that's fun and engaging, just like all the teachers did to me when I came home from school and was so happy and eager to teach my brother, who, by the way, skipped a grade because he was so smart by the time he started school. And so I do think that now, when I think about my daily life and looking at emerging technology, which I find so exciting, it's because I have this way of thinking that is coming from the STEM background that enables me to think logically, as you say, and separate kind of really the facts from the fiction and the emotion and all of that other stuff. So I think it's sort of, it took a while to realize how it was a very logical path, a very natural path, very aligned to passions and interest. But I would encourage you all to think back at, before you were 10. As a kid, what did you love to do? What were you naturally good at? What did you choose to do with your spare time? What games did you love to play? Because in all of that are your natural intents, your natural passions. And if you can align that into what you do, you will always be successful. Because you're inside, you're always going to love what you're doing. And if you love what you're doing, you're going to be good at it.
Yeah.
So, given now the way the world has evolved, would you do any of that differently?
I don't think so. No, I wouldn't do anything differently. I think it's great to have kind of the grounding in kind of coding and the rational. I may have taken one or two additional languages because Pascal is now obsolete, and I think the most progressive language I took was C++, which I don't know if anybody knows what that is either. So it probably would have been good to kind of keep one foot in the door in the programming, because it would have made my life now actually easier starting my own business and being able to do some of the stuff on my own that now I'm going to have to ask and beg and borrow and steal people to develop a website and all that stuff. So, but other than that, no, I think everything happens for a reason and happened for a reason.
Nyla, how do you feel?
I think I would have worked less. So I feel that when I look back, when I was earlier on in my career, I worked a lot before I had kids. I was very focused on my work. I worked long hours. And, you know, in retrospect, I think, you know, it was important because, you know, I accomplished a lot and, you know, whatever, earned the stripes. But when I think about it now, I place a high value, like when I'm interviewing someone to join one of my teams, you know, if they have the credentials, they've had the experience, they have the education, you know, you tick all the boxes. I spend a lot more time trying to find out, you know, have they traveled? You know, do they have hobbies? Are they passionate about things? Are they volunteering? Do they have family, extended family? Do they take care? Because I think that what happens is that all that other stuff that is part of your being and who you are is so important. And I spend so much time developing my professional self that, you know, in hindsight, I probably should have traveled a little bit more. I love to travel. You know, I do have a creative side. There's lots of stuff that I like to do with art. Like, I didn't have a lot of time to do them. And I don't think I would have jeopardized my career trajectory that much. I thought I would have. And so I was really kind of always working hard. I should have played a little bit more, because I do think that there's a development that happens when you, and there's a lot of serendipity that happens through those other experiences that are really important. And so, but I think it's a balance. But in my personal, you know, circumstance, I think back all those times before I had kids, my husband and I, he'd be working late, I'd be working late, we'd be coming, you know, we should have gone out, we should have gone out for dinner, we should have walked on the beach, we should have done more things. And we just didn't feel that we had the permission to do that. There was this, I think, this unrealistic pressure that we had to just keep working. Otherwise, the rest wouldn't have come. And I think if you are a well-rounded person with lots of experience to draw upon and a good balance and good confidence, you will be successful. At the end, I think that's what makes a lot of people successful. It's not just the hours of work.
No, I agree with all that. I think for me, like my immediate answer is I would never do anything differently, because everything has gotten me to where I am today. I think if more my attitude would have been different. Like when I was majoring in math and doing really well in it, and I do think the world has evolved, not enough as I would like to see, but at that time I was embarrassed and I downplayed how good I was at it because it wasn't cool.
It wasn't cool. Right.
And I was a very visible minority. You can rest assured that in my classroom, I stood out. And I really tried to play it down and disappear and be invisible. And now when I look back, if I could say to my younger self, I would say, turn around and look at them and be like, yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
And I'm smarter than you and I'm better than you, and you can just deal with it.
Yeah.
But instead I really played a very passive role. So I think that's what I would have done differently. But I think even though I went in this very different career path, I would have probably done a bit of what Nyla said. I would have balanced more. Instead of like taking all math and finance, I would have just explored more, just taken things that were of interest to me, but I still would have kept that core because I think it has been valuable. So okay, so now we're going to switch topics. And it almost feels cliche because I don't think there's an event that targets women that doesn't talk about balance. And I know that even when we hear it, we're like, oh, balance. But I don't think you can have a discussion without talking about it. And in a way, like when I put my positive attitude spin on it, it's good that we get to have the conversations because it used to not even be up for discussion. So, you know, given the trajectory and the paths you've been on, and I think, you know, in this group of people, I think we all have lessons that we can impart on people. You know, what have you most learned? What are your guiding principles of how you manage yourself to get that, for lack of a better word, balance in what you're doing?
I can start or you can start.
Okay.
Okay. So balance or whatever you want to call it is possible, and you can have it all, but you have to define what it is. I've already mentioned once today, but deliberate choices are very, very important to me. So really figuring out what my non-negotiables are, and by the way, those change on a yearly basis, on a monthly basis sometimes, but there are things in my life that are non-negotiable. And the way one of my colleagues had put it to me, which I think really resonated, is in 5 years from now, am I gonna look back and regret the choice that I made? So if I chose to go to a soccer game instead of a board meeting, am I gonna regret that choice? Or if I went to a board meeting instead of my kid's piano recital, am I gonna regret that choice in 5 years from now? I know people, it's very cliche to say on my deathbed, I'm never gonna say that I should have worked more. I make very deliberate choices about every moment in my day, and by the way, some of those are for me, and I've shed the guilt on having time for me, because as working women, as working moms, eventually, some of you may be already working moms, it's very easy to get into the guilt of, I'm a working mom, every minute I have off, I have to be with my children, I have to be doing something productive. It's very important to take the time, not just for your kids, but also for yourself and for your significant other if you have one. So I make very deliberate choices throughout the day, and sometimes they're not the right choices and I make a different choice next time, but there are a few things that are totally non-negotiable, and if someone's gonna fire me over that, and I know we had some discussions about this, then it's not the right culture for me. So that's another thing that is very important to me, and that's culture. So if I'm worried that I'm gonna get fired because I'm telling someone that I'm going to a yoga class over my lunch hour or at 2 p.m. because I'm gonna work late at night, and if I have to kind of justify all of that, then I'm probably not in the right culture. I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think I totally agree with that. I think it's that is a really good way to look at it in terms of deliberate choices. And I think as you get older and the dynamics of your life changes and you mature, your perspective on choices and it evolves. But I can share like 2 stories that I take with me because they were pivotal moments for me in terms of understanding the balance. And of course, it was an imbalance, as I said earlier, before I had kids, right? Because it was like when it was just no kids, it was just my husband and I, we were younger, we were both kind of at early stages of our career, and we just both worked really hard. And when, and it was okay, everybody around us was doing exactly the same thing, we were just focused on that. But it does change when you actually have a family. And I'm very fortunate that my husband, he's a real partner. He carries a lot of load. There are things like I would rather go to Canadian Tire than the grocery store. I do not do the grocery shopping. And so he does that. There's a lot of roles that we do that work for us and that are true to what we like to do. But I remember when, I'm a very active person. I like to always, be on the go. And when I was pregnant for the first time, suddenly as I went on and on and on the pregnancy, there was less and less and less that I could do to be active. And it was very difficult for me because I was used to just sitting around and doing that. I've been working like crazy up until that point. And so I was always busy, and suddenly I can't do anything. And I took up gardening. I was pregnant, throughout the summer. My son was born at the end of the summer, and we had, moved into a house. There was a garden, and I started gardening. And I really liked it, and I'm still very much an avid gardener. And it's the thing that I do. I work with technology. I work with people to sit there in the dirt, dealing with garden. It's very therapeutic for me, and I'm a very patient person. I like to see things grow over time, so I enjoy gardening. And I remember I was gardening. It was a weekend. It was spring. I was weeding. I was doing everything, and my son was there trolling around in the backyard, and he keeps asking me to go to the park. Let's go to the park. Let's do this. Let's do that. And there I am. I've got my goal. Clean up the garden, I'm going to do this, and I'm working, and all of a sudden he sits in the corner and he starts to cry. And I went over to him and I said, what's wrong, Noah? And he says, you love your plants more than you love me. And I looked and my heart was broken. And I sat him down and I thought, actually, Noah, I love you both the same. Right? Because it was one of those moments where I realized, it was an epiphany for me. What I was doing was not trying to neglect my child. I was filling my own personal need, which was of gardening. And it was coming, in his view, at the expense of time with him. And my dilemma was, they were both important to me. The second thing, but it changed me. That changed me because I realized I had to now recalibrate a little bit because he was yet there were needs that, at his stage. The second one that was very much a game changer for me was now my daughter. So it's a few years later, and we're at home and it's a weekend, and she drew something on the easel and she wanted me to come and see it. And I was walking through the kitchen to go to where her easel was, and she says, "Mommy, come, I want to show you, I'm coming. And just as I was going through, and this is like, smartphones had just, this whole always on, always connected to the office was like a new thing. And my BlackBerry was sitting there on the kitchen counter, and as I walked by, it red light was there. And I glanced over, and I picked it up, and I was reading it, and I hear her saying, "Come, Mommy." And I said, "I'm coming." And I start reading, and I'm looking, and she repeats a second time, "Mommy, come, I can't wait to show you." And I said, I'm coming, Hannah. And she's standing there and she said, "I see you. You're looking at your phone." And there I was, lying to my child. Busted. And that for me started a deliberate choice of not communicating on the weekends. The end of Sunday night, I will go, and people know now that they could get emails from me on Sunday at 11, 12, 1, because Sunday evening is when I reconnect with work. And I don't apologize for that, because in the grand scheme of things, 2 days out of 7 to be focused on your family is not unreasonable. But it took those kinds of moments that really formed me to figure out, okay, what do I value? What do I want to role model? What is important? And you make a deliberate choice. So I agree absolutely with the construct. It's a very productive way of thinking about it. They're different for everyone, and they change over time. But when you know that it is a choice that you want to stick by, you stick by. And I don't know anyone ever in the history of anyone I've ever spoken to that has really lost anything of significance as a result of sticking to your own values and your own. It actually strengthens, other people's perceptions of who you are, and they come to respect it, because it takes guts, actually. Yeah. It takes guts.
I agree. No, I mean, I've had very similar experiences and stories too. I think the one thing that I would add, and it's sort of the moment of hot topic these days, is being in the moment. And that is something that I have really learned. To me, balance is like you can't be doing two things well at the same time. So when you're at work, you should be focused at work, even if that work is in your home. If you're working, you're working. If you're engaging with your family, you're engaging with your family. You're not engaging with your family on your phone, or you're not at work. I mean, yes, you're going to pick up your phone to take a mental break or whatever, but I have found for me that I have to put myself all into whatever it is I'm doing, because actually then the power of it, you're so much more efficient and productive, and then you move on to the next thing. So I think really being in those moments and being mindful of it has made a big difference for me, as opposed to trying to straddle them all at the same time and not really doing any of them that well. But I've had a lot of similar experience. Actually, it made me think there's a book that I love that I read this year, Shonda Rhimes, who wrote Skit and does all that, and her book, The Year of Yes. If anyone hasn't read it, I highly recommend it. And she talks about this thing where she has 3 daughters, I think, and they would always say, "Mommy, come play with me, come do this with me," and she'd be like, "In a minute, in a minute, in a minute." And then her daughter called her on it, and she now has a new rule. She actually has a TED Talk, and she talks about this. It's really great. And she said, anytime one of her kids says, "Mommy, will you play with me?" she always says yes. And at first that seems like crazy. You're like, what if I'm in the middle of something? How do I say yes? She always says yes. And she said the irony of it is the minute you say yes to them and you start playing with them, 2 minutes later they're over you. So really, you basically gave them exactly what they needed, and then you can go back to whatever it was you were doing. And actually, from the moment I read that book, I think I read it earlier this year, I've actually adopted it. Whenever my son says to me, "Mommy, come play with me," I always say yes. And even when it's stuck, especially I think, I don't know, maybe this is very generalization, when you have a child who is a boy and you're a girl, sometimes it's hard. Like, he wants to do trucks and I don't want to do trucks, you know, like, but it's actually amazing once I do it and I engage myself in it, and you see the world through their eyes, and then I think it makes me a better entrepreneur and business person and all those things because of it's the richness of the experience.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
And I think it's been amazing. So now I'm going to flip it on its head. We've been talking about a lot of sort of the upside, you know, the great things in life. But none of this hard work and success and life experience comes without some failure. And I think nobody, you know, who goes out there, whether in a corporate role or an entrepreneurial role, you can't live in the world without exposing yourself to it. So, you know, maybe to take a few minutes to talk about experiences you've had and lessons that you can impart onto this group of how that's impacted you and changed the way you make choices.
Okay. Do you want to start now?
Sure. It's a pretty heavy question.
Yeah. You can lie down on the couch.
All right. When I was 10, no. So I mean, I would say that failure, it's very subjective. You know, I think that if you, I mean, you only know what you know. Like, I think that I'm kind of approaching 50. My friends are turning 50, and one thing I notice is that there's a lot of romanticizing the past and talking about the good old days and remembering when they could do this and this and this. And I find it odd because I believe that the best is kind of ahead. And so I think that that's kind of creates a bit of youthfulness. You know, if you feel old if you sort of think that the best is behind you. You feel young if you think that the best is just ahead of you. And so I've come to kind of know that about myself, that, you know, as you sort of get older and you have all these milestones, birthdays, 20, 30, 40, 50, everybody feels, oh, we're so old. You know, I never feel that way. And I realize now it's because I always think that there's something better and I'm just going to kind of go and do that. So if you have that kind of an attitude as I do, failure is a very subjective thing. I have been in lots of situations where the thing that I was working on has reached a dead end, and we actually have to, you know, shut things down or turn things around, or it didn't quite work out the way that it worked out. But I feel that when I look back at all of them, there was a tremendous amount of learning and there was a tremendous amount of value that was created in each and every instance. I don't regret any of them. And it takes a lot of strength of character to move forward. I'll tell you another story about my kids because I learned so much from people, because it gives you kind of almost like an out-of-body view, right? It's almost like you're a drone on life and you're like watching this thing. But, you know, I learned this from my son. He was trying out for a hockey team, a select hockey team. He was very young. And, you know, he tried out, you know, this one year, you know, he didn't make the team. And he tries really hard, practices, you know, and he gets to the next year and he's trying really hard and it, you know, looks really great. His chances are really great. And then something happens and there's these kids that come from other leagues that join the team, and the math kind of doesn't work out, and however many spots they thought that they would have, they didn't end up having. And he keeps advancing though from tryout to tryout to tryout to tryout, and it's the last one. And they go on the ice and the coach says to the parents, here's what's going to happen. We actually have a very small amount of spots. We're going to watch all the kids. And what we're going to do is, for the children who we're not picking, we're going to let them know on the ice. And because there's a small number of them, we're going to let them know on the ice. And immediately after they're finished the skate, we're going to have the first team meeting. So I'm watching, and they're going on, everything's looking good. And I see the coach go over and talk to my son. And he puts his arm around him, and he's like a little pusher. He's like, 8 years old, and he whispers something to him, and pats him on the helmet, and skates away, and the practice continues, and the whistle blows, and they all come off the ice, and I'm standing there, and the door's open, and he looks at me, and he just says, so we go into the dressing room, all the parents are there, because the parent meeting's happening, team meeting's happening, and he's sitting down, and I said, buddy, we're going to get undressed really quickly, we're gonna pack up your stuff, and we're gonna go home. And I said, okay. And he's like fighting back tears. He says, okay. So we get undressed, and there were only 2 kids that didn't make this team. And all the parents are standing there, and everybody's as quiet as it is in this room, because he's the only one, the only 2 kids getting undressed. And he gets undressed, and he's really fighting back tears. Everything is in the bag. I zip up the bag, and I said, okay, buddy, we're out of here. And we get up, and he starts walking. And the thing that was really hard was that he had a lot of friends on this team. It's kind of Avenue Road hockey. I don't know if anybody knows. It's kind of a Jewish league. Like, all the kids he knew just about everybody else on the team. And so it was hard because they were his friends. And it was hard for them because he didn't make it. The numbers were, tight. So anyways, we get up to go, and he stops, and he turns around, and he shakes the hand of every kid in the dressing room. And he's like, congrats, Jamie, congrats, Ethan, congrats, good job, good job. And he congratulates them all for making the team. The parents in the dressing room were in tears because they were not capable on an emotional level of dealing with this. They were in the, my kid made it, your kid didn't mentality. And here's this kid who rose above it. And I was baffled. Like, you don't teach your kid to do this, it's part of his character. And we get into the car, and he was in a little car seat, and I put him in his little kind of car booster seat thing, and I'm like zipping him up, and I said, Noah, you can cry now. It's okay to cry. And he cried his eyes out the whole ride home. We got home, he was still crying. I put him in bed, he's still crying his eyes out. And of course, my husband always traveling when these things happen, so I'm all on my own. He's crying and crying and crying and crying, and I'm consoling him. I'm like, it's okay. And he says, Mom, I'll be fine tomorrow. I'm gonna cry tonight. And he did. He's like, you can go. I'm just gonna cry. And he did, and he was okay, and he picked himself up, and he made the team the next year, and he had a long view. And it taught me a lot about the perspective you need to have, right? You hear things like, don't sweat the small stuff, have a long view, da-da-da, it's a moment in time. Like, they're throwaways until you actually see somebody who comes by it really naturally. And I thought to myself, whatever I'm ever gonna worry about this kid, marks, this experience, he will be okay because he has something that you can't teach. And so I think that is very important. So when you look at failure, it's a relative term. It's a relative term. Yes, he failed in terms of making the team. He gained so much in terms of strength of character. And he had an opportunity to be in a moment where making the team would have been easy. Not making the team and shaking everyone's hand and crying and being okay the next morning, that was an accomplishment. And the amount of parents that actually called me afterwards, and even the coaches, I'm going to reconsider. He said she has so much integrity. I said, you know what? This is a lesson. Like, you've given him a gift that I'm not going to take away from him, because you bet he will be there next year and he's going to skate his ass off, and hopefully he makes the team, and that's what this is all about. And he did. And so I think that, I know that it's tough. It's tough working at Rogers. It's tough being in that kind of environment. But I bring all of this with me every single day. So when I'm sitting in a meeting and someone is not treating women properly, or not listening to my comments, or someone's, behaving badly and being petty, I can rise above it, because to me, it's not just this job, this role. That's not how I'm just defining myself. There's so many other things. And that's when I say, I would have worked less and I would have developed all that other stuff, because in the end, it's all that other stuff that I think gives you the courage to persevere and to be true to yourself and make these deliberate choices and find your passion and say, you know what, I'm good at math, I'm going to stick to that, right? Like, it's okay to do all that, but it's hard to get comfortable because it's against the grain. It's not the norm. It's not what people tell you to do.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah.
I can't stop it. I would just add to this definition of failure, and I was teaching a marketing class for a while, and that subject would come up, and the other thing I always like to remind people is it is in the definition. Like, I'd always give these analogies, well, very timely this week. If you go to the World Series and you don't win, are you a failure? Like,
right.
You made it to the World Series. If you go to the Olympics and you get a silver, like, even if you got to the Olympics, like, is that a failure? I mean, it's that benchmark. Now, all that said, and especially in the world that I, have inhabited as an entrepreneur, the odds are against you. Businesses fail all the time. And so you can't even dip your toe in it if you're not willing to risk that might happen to you. And people have always said to me, how do you do it? And I'm down at now 4 times. How do you do it when you might fail? And I said, well, I don't think about it.
Yeah, you don't fail.
I actually don't.
Yeah.
And I don't, like, if I were to wake up every morning being worried about if it's going to fail, I actually wouldn't be able to breathe or be productive. I'd be in a state of panic all the time. And actually there was another amazing TED Talk, and I don't remember the name of the person, and they said the difference that separates entrepreneurs who actually act and build out their companies and dreams and the ones that don't is this one mental attitude. The ones who succeed are the ones who actually believe in themselves. So 2 people could have equally good ideas, but the one person doesn't let that part of them take over, and the other one does. The other person can have this great idea and then just be down on themselves and be like, no, I'm not good enough, I can't do this. And I think, it's a skill. Some people are more born with it, but I think it's something you also get over time with maturity.
But I think it's also earlier when you were talking about, how you stepped down as a CEO. It was a deliberate choice. It wasn't a failure, right? It was a deliberate choice. You said, okay, I for whatever reason, this is what I need to do now.
Well, and I do think that short of, there are certain very unique circumstances, a horrible illness, something catastrophic happening. Aside from those very specific instances, things don't happen to you. They all are choices that we make. So, yeah, and I made the choice to get into the business. I made the choice of the structure of the business, all those things. And not everything has a rosy finish, and that's just not the way the world works. And if you're gonna play, you're gonna take the risks.
Yeah, I would just kind of sum it up by the way I approach kind of failure. First of all, I hate the word failure, and I hate the word miss. So my biggest pet peeve is when someone says, "Oh, that was a miss," because that is not productive. So what I like to do is kind of when I coach people and for my own self-coaching, I like to really call it out as there needs to be a time for mourning and a time for kind of acknowledging that didn't go as well as you thought it was going to go, and then quickly pivot and learn. So really setting out a time frame of I'm going to grieve for this period of time, and then I'm going to pick myself right back up and I am going to take the learnings. I'm not going to make that mistake again. And everything happens for a reason, and the reason this didn't go as well as it could have gone is because someone somewhere is trying to teach me something that I need to do better next time, and that was not the way it was intended to be. So that's the way I kind of coach people through, because it's very important, especially in this day and age when technology is so fast and companies are so fast, it's important to take calculated risks and not be scared of calculated risks, but calculated is the key word, right? So you have to be comfortable with how much risk am I actually taking? What is the downside, right? Is the downside that I don't make any money? Is it that I'm going to lose my house? Is it that I'm not going to be able to send my child to school? So really being comfortable with what the worst case scenario is and saying, okay, if I can be comfortable with the worst case scenario, I'm going to do my very best and iterate and learn along the way and not wait until it's too late, where it's a bigger risk and it's a bigger deal if you kind of pull back or pull out. So I think recognizing when failure or something not going the right way is coming, I think as women we have that intuition a lot of the time, but I think as women sometimes we don't wait long enough and we kind of pull back before the risk is actually there. So kind of balancing that and recognizing and making the deliberate choices, I think is really, really important.
I agree. I think it's very insightful. So thank you. So the last sort of subject area, and I think it'll be a shorter one just to wrap it up, it kind of brings us full circle. It's sort of this broader technology and innovation. We've kind of dabbled in it through the whole conversation, but it's pervasive, it's in our lives, it's only going to get more so. Love it, hate it, love, hate it. How does it impact your...
Let Nyla go first for this one.
Yeah, I think, I always applaud innovation. My People ask me, what do you think is the greatest innovation ever? You know, to me, it's the zipper. I think the zipper, I can't imagine what my life would be like if no one had invented the zipper. But really, like, I think to me, innovation is, you know, it's small, it's big, it's significant, impactful, it's not, I'm a creative thinker. I applaud the creativity that someone came along and saw something in a completely different way. And I think that the innovations that we all know about are the ones where that new way had some real application in our lives. There's lots of very innovative ideas that we don't even know about. And so I think that technology and innovation, when we talk about that in terms of, you know, markets and in our world, we're actually really talking about the ones that stick for some reason. And so for me, you know, I'm very interested in helping people understand, helping them understand technology and why they should care about certain technologies, because I believe that technology progress is positive, and I believe that a lot of the new technologies, there is some real inherent purpose to them that will be positive, and it may not always start off that way. And so my mission is to be really close to a lot of technology innovation because I'm interested in it. You know, I'm a Canadian Tire girl. I was always fascinated by that. It's where I'm comfortable. But I think the value that I bring is that I'm really speaking on behalf of the person who is not interested in technology and who is going to inherit this technology whether they like it or not. And so helping them to find true meaning. You know, I think that the interesting thing in my work is that, you know, I sit around with a lot of engineers, a lot of business people, a lot of people who have done, you know, the spreadsheets and they figured out real opportunity in the market and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm the one that brings a lot of the human stuff to it, you know, a lot of the value-based things to it. And it's a bit of an outlier perspective because at the end of the day, it's all about human beings. Like, I remember when I was, you know, I'll just kind of close with this one kind of story, which is we had, so most of my tenure at Rogers has been when Ted Rogers was the CEO. And in the roles that I was in, I worked very closely with him and I reported into his daughter Melinda, and so I had a lot of exposure to him. And then when he passed away, a new CEO came in, Nadir Mohammed, who had been somebody who had been working in the company at that point like 20 years, and he was almost like a son of Ted, and so it was natural that he would take over the company next. And in the tenure of Nadir Mohammed, I ran an incubator, and so it was constantly about every month after month, I had to get the funding, I had to prove, they kept asking me all the time about your startups and the revenue, and it was very tough because here's a company that's like billions and billions and billions of dollars, and here's me, like a company that's like, you know, okay, 3 million, guess what, I went from 3 million to 5 million, woohoo, and they're like, oh, it's like chump change, it's like petty cash, right? And it was frustrating. But nevertheless, we kept moving forward. And when Nadir Mohammed retired and he was leaving the organization, the last meeting that I had with him, we were finishing up a bunch of stuff, and he said to me, you know, Nyla, before I leave, he said, you know, let's, you know, just like have a person-to-person kind of a talk. And I said to him, okay, so Nadir, what are you going to do? What do you think you're going to do next? And he said, well, you know, he said, I was thinking, I think I'm going to, like, go into startups. You must be fucking joking. Like, and he laughed. He was surprised, and then he laughed. And I said, you are going into startups? I said, for the past 4 years, I've been coming to you every single month, having to defend why we're doing startups, you know, uphill, and you're gonna go into startups? Like, why weren't you in startups when we were doing all of this stuff? Like, we could have, like, knocked it out of the park. Like, I don't get it. And he said to me, you know, I said, what? Like, I supported you. I always said yes. I gave you what you wanted. I did what I did. And he said, you know, I was the CEO of this big company. Like, the street's measuring me on ABCD. Like, I was supporting you. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. Like, never really thought about it that way. And so he said, but you know what? Now that I'm going into startups, he said, I have a question for you. He said, what would you say was the thing that made you so successful? Because he said, you know, it's true. Like, you were uphill. You were coming. It was a battle every month over month over month. And he said, but nevertheless, he said, you know, kind of were able to make it grow. And he said, what's the one thing that you've learned that you would give me as advice going forward? And I said to him, the one thing you need to remember is at the end of the day, human beings are involved. If it was just about spreadsheets, if it was just about math or analysis or market analysis or theory, the world would be perfect. It would be perfectly balanced. But as soon as human beings are involved, it's a completely different dimension. And for me, that's what I care about. I care about the human beings. I care about people. I'm connected to them. And that, I think, is a differentiator that women bring in the technology sphere. The fact that we've taken our technology backgrounds and we've parlayed them into roles where we actually make stuff happen is no coincidence. I think a lot of women, and I've done an analysis at Rogers of the entire employee workforce, and we over-index of women in the roles that are actually controlling stuff happening. And so I think there is a real future for women as things become more technical, more disconnected, less human, more empirical. There is this EQ, this sensitivity, this human side that we need to play to our strengths. And we should not try to be like one of the boys. We should be who we are. Nurturing, communicative species, and because that's what I think the technology field needs more of.
Yeah. That's a beautiful summary. I wish we could just end on that at
we can.
So I will say, I mean, the pendulum swings, right? So technology and how it dominates us is still relatively new. So my hope, after seeing people, I don't know if any of you have seen Leonard Sachs or read his book, or you're looking at me with blank stares, but basically he does a lot of talks about how technology affects boys and girls. So boys, video games, girls, social media, and it's a very scary talk. So I really hope that in 10 years from now, when my kids are prime teenagers, people aren't so obsessed with social media, because it's just one of many tools that we have to communicate, right? So we were having a conversation at the beginning of this evening about the balance between kind of face-to-face interaction versus technology interaction. And I think both are amazing and serve different purposes. And I think we're still trying to find the balance there. So, you know, from an HR perspective, I'm very aware and conscious of how teams work better when they're in person and sometimes way more productive when they're virtual. And I don't believe that you have to be face-to-face all the time, nor that you can operate entirely virtually all the time and no personal interaction. So I hope we get, and I know we will, get to more of a balanced approach, that technology is just one of the things we have, like a car is just one of the things we have, right? We're not using technology as a key line topic in a discussion. It's one of the tools we have. And in terms of, I totally agree with you in terms of the value that women particularly bring, and women in STEM, is, you know, there's a lot of talk about future of work and the disaggregation of work, and that's hugely powerful, because basically if you don't have talent in your market, you can go and employ someone virtually in India, and it's virtually seamless at this point, and that is wonderful. But I do think the value that people, and women are very good at this, bring to it is the humanization of all that, because at the end of the day, you can bring together a virtuoso team of virtual and all over the world, but someone needs to kind of be the conductor of that team, and women do that exceptionally well, because we have kind of a sixth sense of how people are feeling in those moments. And the change, why I liked change management, and I never even knew change management existed. It was kind of like, what do we do about the people? And I think, you know, a woman in STEM is like power right there. So I don't, well, we didn't even ask how many people in this room consider themselves in STEM. So can you just show me a show of hands? Okay, so we're good. We're getting better. So that's my final
Yeah,
words.
that's great. No, well, and it's funny, you mentioned the car thing, and the idea that I had going through my head is, you know, there's that old line about Henry Ford, when he invented the automobile, you know, people thought they needed a faster horse.
Yeah, exactly.
They needed a car. However, you still have your feet.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's all about the balance, like using the balance again. It's like technology, the internet, all of that, it's a channel of distribution. It's one way of communicating and doing business. Like, I don't think of myself, people always say something about me being a tech entrepreneur. I'm not a tech entrepreneur. I create brands. I happen to use the internet as my distribution channel. That's it. It's just the way I do business, you know. And so I have a phone. I can put it away sometimes. You should never, you know, I don't want to be one of those, I used to walk to school uphill both ways. Doesn't matter. It's, and yes, we used to do that. We have these better tools now. Great, use them, but
I'm not going to take out my World Book encyclopedia.
yeah, I don't need to bring the
Except
encyclopedia back. But you know what? I'm going to put the phone away sometimes. I'm going to walk somewhere. I'm going to do those things. And I think it's sort of taking it with a grain of salt and leveraging it, but not letting it overtake you. So with that, we're going to wrap up and say
Let's
thank
take some
you.
questions from the audience if anybody wants to ask.
Yes.
So, my question is, when you're talking about work-life balance and making time for yourself and for your families, and you mentioned, like, looking back, you said how you wish you had more time to walk on the beach with your husband and go for dinners and all that stuff. Considering that a lot of us are kind of in the middle of our career, or if not early beginnings of our careers, how can you carve out, like, and I'm assuming you're in leadership roles by that point, by the time that you were able to kind of say, I want to create a bit of space for myself. If you're in like the middle of your career like that and you have a boss that is demanding that you work on weekends and getting you, and you have short deadlines, maybe clients have expectations, like I work in advertising, apparently I'm always on. So in doing that, how would you advise us to kind of make that time for ourselves in that type of environment without being in a position of leadership where you can say, I'm not doing this?
Well, I can start the answer just from my perspective. So I found that it took me a while to realize that no one was grading me. No one was giving me a mark in the office. So I came from many years of university where everything was measured by your mark. So you had to study, and it was very much a performance culture by only one measure. And I think now, when I have people who work on my teams at the same point at I was when I was working like a dog, I'm not measuring them by only that measure. I am measuring them to see how multidimensional they are, because that's a criterion by which I decide if they have growth potential on my team. So I have people who are very good at their job. I cannot have a conversation with them about anything other than their job. I could have somebody who is really good at their job, maybe not very good at their job, but I can have conversations with them about a range of things. They are a learning mind, they are a creative mind, they are a curious mind, they have a lot of interest, they have a lot of experience. I would double down on that other person. Mm-hmm. And that's what I realized in my case, because I think I had all I knew was that, okay, I have to do a good job, but when you come from an environment where you're graded, like, you can never really study too much. I guess you could, but I was at McGill. You were always kind of studying. Even when you thought you knew it, you studied more, and you studied more, and you studied more. So there I come into the workforce, and it's like, I did already a pretty fantastic job. I don't know what made me think that I needed to work 4 or 5 more hours doing an unbelievably unexpected, above expectation job. I didn't need to do that. I didn't know that I need to do that, that I didn't need to do that. But I don't think that my boss at the time would have thought any less of me or my potential had I spent less hours in the office and more hours bringing other things into the office. And I think it's more important now, where the world is very different. Many, many more doors are open. Many, many more opportunities are going to be presented in front of you. You have to harness all of your interests, all of your potentials at all times, because it's about you. You're at this stage where you're developing as much awareness about yourself and your potential, and there's nothing in a box. Like, my son is applying to university. He said, I think I should go in this program. I think I should go in that program. I think, what do you think about that? And I said, what do you think about this, Mom? And I said, this is what I think. I think that 4 years from now, by the time you're done university, you are going to be hired for a job that we don't even know about today, in a company that most likely doesn't even exist today, in a role that no one can even define because we can't even fathom. So you need to go to university preparing for that. Open your mind, do what you like, get as many experiences as you can, because I do think that that's what the future, certainly that's what I look for the people that I hire on my team, is their potential to be X. And X is undefined.
Yeah.
It's all these different skills. And I think we have them intuitively, naturally, and that's why in our structured world, we have been able to kind of rise wherever we have risen, because I think people didn't really know that that was what made kind of us special.
Yeah.
But I do think it's a bit more of the norm now.
Yeah.
You would have more to say, because it's
yeah.
your profession, not mine. But
No, not at all. So a few things. One, I touched on before, which is the culture a right fit, right? Like, I'm not going to tell you to quit your job, but you got to be comfortable that the culture is the right fit. Number two is more and more these days, you're probably not going to be at the same company forevermore. So you really have to be deliberate, again, back to deliberate choices, about what you're getting out of this experience. And if you are getting the max out of this experience by working those long hours for now and saying this is for now and this is what I'm going to do for now, then fine. What I will caveat though is that I actually was at McGill too, and I never studied past 9 because I knew after 9 my marginal productivity was going to tank. And it's proven white space is very, very important, and especially in a creative field. So you need to figure out a way to, in a non-threatening way, have the discussion with your boss that I actually will be more effective if I can go and take a walk for an hour. And not asking permission, but I will be out of pocket from 12 till 1 because that's when I have to practice yoga, and you will see how much more creative I'll be after that hour, right? So it's about deliberate choices, and it's about, no, I'm not a slacker because I actually need time for my brain to come up with the next creative idea. I don't know about you guys, but I get my most creative ideas when I'm driving in my car, when I'm running on the Beltline, when I'm, you don't get creative in the shower. So you don't get creative ideas by overworking your brain and overtaxing your body. It's just not possible. So thinking of ways to have those conversations, and if it's shut down, it's thinking about, is this the right place? And what are you getting out of this experience that you're going to be able to take to your next place? That's what I would say.
Great answer. Other questions?
Yeah. You all are kind of at different points on the spectrum of staying in one company culture for a long period of time versus jumping around a lot more. I know now it's much more common to, I think, stay a career was 2 years, or at a job 2 years and move around. So what advice would you give, or looking back on your own careers in hindsight, would you have done anything differently, moving companies? Nyla, you've been at Rogers for a long time. Would you, looking back, wanted to try out different cultures, or would you guys have preferred to, looking back, stay at one company over a longer term and like experience a culture that way? Because you've had experiences with different cultures. So hindsight's 20.
Yeah, I think actually, I'll probably speak for everyone because I think everyone say the same thing. I think it doesn't matter if it's the same company or a series of different companies. You have to be constantly learning and being challenged and getting new opportunities. If that's not happening, then you're gonna stagnate. So I know Nyla has even said that. Like if her trajectory at Rogers hadn't been what it was, she would have left because it had to be something new. For me, I moved a lot because I'm always, for me, especially like in the last 12 or 14 years of doing all the entrepreneurial stuff, I love the inception. I love coming up with the idea. I love bringing it to market. I love building the team. In like Sweet Spot and Elux, when they grew to about 25 people, in both situations, I was like, meh. Like, I'm out. Like, my brain is out. I'm ready so that's, for me, I have to go to the next challenge. So, I think that's sort of the when you know. I don't think, like, it's not like it was where people look at your resume and say, oh, why did you keep doing it? Like, that's just gone, which is a good thing.
Yeah, and I'll even give a very real-time example of that. So I left American Express, 2.5 years in my job, loved it for the first 2 years. Going into the third year, I was kind of like, it's kind of the same thing over again, right? The first year I was kind of starting from scratch, developing my HR plan, building my team, developing my team. Second year I kind of saw the fruits of our labor. It was really exciting. going into the third year of planning, it's incremental innovation, but it's kind of becoming business as usual. So it's a big leap for me, because I was a loyalist at Deloitte for 10 years and then a loyalist at American Express for 6 years. It's a big leap for me to actually look myself in the mirror and saying, I'm actually not growing at my max potential, and I'm not ready for that yet. Potentially, if I was 10 years or 15 years older, I would say, you know what, I'll just coast this out. But I'm not ready for that phase, and I need rejuvenation, and I've learned so much about what I'm passionate about and where I operate best through this last 2.5 years, that I need to go find that somewhere else, and I need to find a new kind of next gear where I feel like I'm having a big impact, and I'm kind of performing at kind of my max level. So I made the choice to leave on a very, very high note, which is great. If you can leave on a very high note, it's very good, because you have all your connections in place, and it's great. And I've kind of taken the leap, and I'm there right now. And you know what I say? Back to the risk and the calculated risk. Worst comes to worst, I will go back into a corporate job in a year from now, right? So I've given myself a year, and I've said, if in a year from now I'm like, nah, don't like this consulting thing anymore, too risky, don't like it, then I can always go back to corporate, right? But I've made the deliberate choice to leave on a high note and to try something new.
Yeah, I would say, like, Rogers is a bit of an anomaly, and as I said at the beginning, it's like my whole career there has been kind of accidental. I'm like the most, atypical person you'd expect, but it's been exactly like Joanna said. Like, I pretty much like clockwork. Every 24 months, I had a different role. So I do think it's the 2-year. You get the 2-year itch.
Yes.
If you are a builder, and if that's what you do, then that's what you do. And so once you built it, and once it becomes scaling and it becomes business as usual, you should get bored.
Yeah.
And if the company understands you well, they should move you on to something else. And so I was fortunate that I had that trajectory at Rogers, but it was just the timing of my little sweet spot and what was happening, in there. But I would say that one thing is, again, my son going into university, what we talked about is, like, what's your differentiator? You have to really understand what is it that you do, that you love to do, and that you do well, that not everybody does. And it doesn't have to be something grandiose. It just has to be something that you really love to do, because there's this great book, and it's this whole big new word out there, grit, and it's this amazing, study about, well, what does it take to get people to really kind of, persevere, and it's, it's this notion of grit. But grit is passion and perseverance intersecting. And you absolutely, in our professions, we have all persevered, but I think you've heard, we've all been doing it because it's something we've been passionate about. And that's what's really important. And so you really do need to understand, what is it that you love to do and that you're good at, and what is your differentiator? Because I think if you have a unique skill, and if someone can say, hey, what, like, why should I hire you? You should have an answer. And it could be anything. It's because I'm really great at getting stuff done. Because, people really like me, I'm a really great leader. Or I'm really great with numbers. Or I work really hard, and you can always count on me to deliver. Like, whatever it is. As long as you sort of have that differentiator so that people can say, if I got one phone call to make, I'm going to make that phone call to Nyla, because I know Nyla can do this. That's how you rise above. And so as long as you have that, I think no fear, really no, you have to be kind of fearless.
Yeah.
Because what your security comes from what you do and your awareness. I think there's one more question.
Is there one more? Yeah.
Oh, sure. I've really enjoyed your presentation in terms of your feedback. I've been a technical recruiter. Started off as a social worker, raised 2 kids with home. And my question is about, and after leaving the corporate world and having a home-based business and the isolation and all that comes with raising 2 daughters, but I stayed home until I discovered this place yesterday. And I came here and she told me, oh, we're having this thing. I've been at home, stay-home mom, and I had companies like Sun Microsystems, and various IT companies where I was placing engineers thinking, and I was receiving the $30,000 checks on my mailbox, and I wasn't happy because I was isolated. I hit that, ooh, and I'm like, but I was, involved with my kids figure skating, hockey, etc. So my question to you is, and being a Latina woman, seeing a Latina in the audience, being a Latina woman and coming to Canada young, so there was a lot of challenges. And we talk about being a female in the workforce, but being a minority in the workforce, it's quite interesting. And how that plays out, and how you have to further prove yourself. Because, a woman, but now you're a minority. Now, it's all this stories you have to overcome. And I think I found for myself being self-employed the best option, where I had unlimited income, unlimited freedom. It was my own boss, without any of the barriers. Now with technology, we can create anything we can. I mean, I started in psychology. I was a social worker working with abuse, sexual abuse.
Sir, what's the question?
With technology, how can we develop ourselves? Because any of us can really have a business nowadays using the online system. Truly. And I love your share. I love all your shares. Particularly about being a woman in business, using technology. Where did you get your support, and how did you make it happen? Because I love how you share, you had all these great ideas and grew to 25 and you were bored. I can't get past 3 employees. And I guess, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of start for me, I didn't start off as an entrepreneur. I worked in the corporate world for quite some time. And I think also between my schooling experiences and all the different things, I built a network of people that throughout my career, both corporate and entrepreneurial, I've leaned on along the way, and they've been very supportive. And obviously that would be a bigger challenge if I came to this country and I didn't know all those people. But I think the great thing about places like this business space and all the different organizations and all those things is people. At the end of the day, that's what is meeting new people, reaching out, asking for help. That's a big thing. Not trying to do it all yourself. I mean, that's what I've learned along the way. In my businesses, I'm the face. I get a lot of credit for it, but I always say it's the team. I mean, none of my businesses would have been successful if I didn't have the people around me who did what they did. So I think that's what's been the key.
Yeah, I also think networking is such a dirty word, but you went to figure skating and hockey and all these activities,
my
right?
kids do.
I know, but did you take those opportunities to really take an interest in the parents that are in the stands, right? You never know who you're gonna meet anywhere you go, right? So now I have a bit of a yes habit now around networking type of events that I'm invited to, because you never know who you're gonna meet, who you may not need now, which are, by the way, the best people to meet, because you don't have any hidden agenda with them, right? You're just getting to know them as a person. And then, do you happen to know anybody 2 years later, right? And lo and behold, they know someone who can help you out. And now with technology, it's so much easier to do that, right? There's Facebook, there's LinkedIn, there's Instagram, whatever it is. But I'm a very big proponent you can never go wrong by meeting more people. Right? So take those opportunities when you're taking your kids to activities to have a genuine interest in the other parents in the stands. You never know who you're going to meet.
I just want to jump on the panel for 5 seconds and add that as a new immigrant myself, you go to these networking things and you want to meet new people, but it takes a long time for those relationships to mature.
Yeah.
You build them over years and you meet people and you see their face again and again and again and again, and then you ask for the favor or for the help. So it's really about integrating yourself into a community of people who have various expertise, and then getting to know them as people, and then when the opportunity arises, which might be 2 years later, it might be 5 months later, it might be 10 years later, saying, hey, I would really appreciate your feedback, I'd really appreciate your help on this particular project.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Thanks a lot to our speakers. Let's give them a round of applause. And feel free to approach them, I guess, after, and have a wonderful evening, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Very nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for participating.
Please, I have little
Thank you cards for you. This is for you. Thank you so much.
much. It was really a pleasure. It's also inspiring to me. Like honestly, real role models. I'm so happy to have had you. Thanks so much.
No, it's very, very